Brock Purdy crashing back down to earth. It's only been 3 games, though. He could turn it all around, but he hasn't yet. And in this moment, what is the most alarming thing about Brock Purdy's recent play or just play in general?
Yeah, Grant, I think the most alarming thing is that it's really not any different than who he has been. If you look at the Cleveland Browns game aside, the Cleveland Browns game was really bad almost all the way through. I think that game was an anomaly. But when I look at the last 2 games, and this is where people I think are getting caught up because he played so well for most of those games until the very end. And so people are hanging their hat on what happened prior to those interceptions because he made some good throws. He looked good. He looked like himself, frankly. He looked like he had always been playing. But that to me is actually the most concerning thing because Brock Purdy has not played any different the last 2 weeks, Grant. In fact, you can go all the way back to college. He would put the ball in harm's way a lot in college. Then his rookie year, nobody wanted to talk about it, but he was, I think, 21st among starting quarterbacks in turnover-worthy plays. But defenses weren't catching the interceptions, so people didn't want to talk about that. Then we got into training camp. You reported all the time that he was throwing interceptions. People didn't want to talk about that because it was training camp and he was testing the limits and all these other things. Then we get into the regular season this year. He's not turning the ball over, but again, he's got a high turnover-worthy play percentage. And finally, just now, teams are capitalizing on what he has always done. Brock Purdy right now of starting quarterbacks ranks 30th in turnover-worthy play percentage. That is not good. However, he's always done this. So I think the most concerning or alarming thing is that Brock had always been doing this. Defenses just weren't capitalizing. And so now people are starting to open their eyes and their ears are perking up and they're like, hold on, he's in a slump, right? No, he's playing like he's always played. Teams are just capitalizing. So if teams continue to capitalize, you're going to see this type of stuff happen. If they don't, then he absolutely can go back to his winning ways and all the things that were great. But nothing has changed with Brock Purdy. And I think that is the most alarming thing.
Very alarming. And I think another thing that's alarming is that he's been blowing teams out for like the first 10 games of his career, scoring a lot of points, not in close games, makes it look easy. But his team, he has such a good supporting cast. It's unsustainable. His team was healthy. Finally, there's some injuries. Finally, you take a couple all-pros away from him, and you find him down just a few points. 1-score games in the fourth quarter, and all of a sudden he looks like a choker, at least the last few weeks. Like, he brought him down the field against Cleveland, didn't finish the drive, didn't have to. But the next 2 weeks, I mean, he has 4 turnovers in the fourth quarter the last 2 weeks, 3 picks and a fumble. That's something we didn't know about him. And I think we're learning, like, maybe if the game is tight and he has to be a hero, quote unquote, and not just take what the defense gives him, then this turnover thing pops up big time. He doesn't just, not lead the drive. He turns it over again and again. That's a big problem. To me, that's a guy who would get benched on another team. Like, you see what happened to Jimmy Garoppolo? See what happened to Jimmy Garoppolo in Vegas? What would happen to Brock Purdy in Vegas? What would happen to Brock Purdy on other teams? I feel like that's what we're kind of seeing, man. Maybe they were pumping him up the way they pumped up Jimmy.
Well, we can look at this last game as an example to what I'm saying. This last game was really, really good. He did a lot of really good things. He started to get mobile, which was awesome to see as well. And I think that can help him, especially against man defenses. I think that's kind of his counterattack. He's been so great against zone, not so much against man, but that is something he can do, is get mobile and force them either out of man or force them to spy, what have you. But one thing that happened twice in that game was he put the ball in harm's way before any of the actual turnovers happened. They just weren't intercepted.
Second quarter.
Second quarter over the middle, and then he had one where he threw it to Ayuk on the outside, and the ball just died on him, and the corner broke inside. If he had broken out, it might have been a pick six. The point is he's always put the ball in harm's way. Teams either capitalize or they don't. When they capitalize, this is what you get. When they don't, what you saw for a big stretch of games is what you're going to get. So you're playing this risk game of, do they intercept it or do they not? The question is not, is he going to put the ball in harm's way? The answer is yes, he will put the ball in harm's way. The question is does the opposing team capitalize on it? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. That's the NFL.
Yeah. So maybe it's a law of averages, but it seems like this thing was going to pop up. And I saw it in training camp. Maybe I made too big of a deal out of it, but I feel like a lot of people made not a big enough deal out of it. And I think maybe Kyle understood that you practice like you play. And now that this is happening, maybe he's not that surprised. I'm not that surprised. I was so surprised that he went 5 games without throwing a pick. Couldn't believe it. And now it's like, it's okay. It's averaging out. So we'll see. But right now I'm looking at what happened to Jimmy Garoppolo. He put up really good numbers last year with Christian McCaffrey, goes to the Raiders, doesn't even make it 8 games, benched for Aiden O'Connell. And I think it's fair to wonder, okay, well, what would Brock Purdy look like on another team? We've never seen that. What would Brock Purdy look like on terrible team A, like the Raiders? I mean, you take away Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel, and all he has left, quote unquote, is Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Jawan Jennings, Kyle Juszczyk, and he can't put up more than 17. That's a bad sign. And the turnovers are popping up. That's a bad sign.
Yeah, I think there was 2 questions that we had about Brock Purdy. And long term, we still don't necessarily know the answer to these things. But right now, I think we do for this season. The 2 questions were, can he win without all the elite talent around him? Can he continue to perform at that level? There is no. And the other question was, when they get deep in the playoffs and they inevitably meet an elite quarterback who does not care how good the 49ers defense is and puts up points, can he win in a shootout? And I think the answer is also no.
Yeah. So that's alarming. Is it worth seeing what they have in Sam Darnold, or is it like, have we seen that?
No. See, there's a point where the hate's gone too far, and Sam Darnold is where the hate's. I will say though. I was just going to say, he's not unbenchable. He hasn't built up that cachet. I'm not trying to act as if he just can't get benched if this continues. But right now, I think that would be a disaster. And I think it's actually closer than what people think. I do. But I also don't think it's the right decision.
Okay. I mean, if he's pressing and it's getting worse, like it went from 1 turnover against Cleveland to 2 against Minnesota to 3 against Cincinnati, and it could have been 5. I mean, if he's pressing and it's getting worse, he might just need a week off to just like relax. And I'm not saying Sam Darnold's good, but he had to play on the Jets and the Panthers. We haven't seen Brock Purdy have to play on teams like that. I'm just saying. So if Brock Purdy is just taking the team down with him, you might just want to give him a breather for a week. Just be like, you know what? You just woo-saw over here, and we're going to let Sam Darnold try to manage the game. And when you find yourself, let us know. I don't know.
I think
I don't trust him.
You hope that week is this bye week. That's what you hope. But again, it's not. He's not playing outside of Cleveland. Just remove that game because it was a bad game. But I also think that was an anomaly. What is he going to change? This is who he's been. This was a college thing. This was a last year thing. This is no different. So what is the expectation? Where is he going to change his game? What do you think is going to happen for the rest of this year that he's just going to be a completely different decision maker than what he's always been his whole entire career through college? It's just not. And that's my issue is with quarterbacks that are bad decision makers. It's why I don't like Sam. I think Sam's a worse decision maker. And so that's why I wouldn't go to Sam. But Brock is not a sound decision maker throughout a whole course of a game. He's just not.
All I'm going to say, and again, Sam Darnold didn't play much with the starters, although he did play a little bit with the starters in training camp when Brock had the occasional day off. Brock turned it over way more than Sam did in training camp. Maybe that means nothing. But Brock turned it over way more than Sam did. I'm just saying. Anyway,
Sam was ultra conservative, man. I mean, that's what you have to do. Yeah, you might be right about that. But in order to be ultra conservative, you also have to have a defense that is going to get stops. because right now the defense isn't getting stops. And so that is forcing him to play a little bit of hero ball. So now these mistakes are getting magnified. If that defense continues to not get stops, whether it's Sam or Brock,
That's true. That is
play
true.
hero ball, and both of them will turn the
Doesn't matter.
ball over.
That's a good point.
Yeah.